In this film, Yahya Kemal is at your age. Do you want to be friends with him? Friends, I am Yahya Kemal Beyatlı. I am one of the important representatives of Turkish poetry in the Republican period. I would like to introduce myself to you. I was born in 1884 in Skopje. My father, Ibrahim Najibey, was one of the mayors of Skopje and my mother was Nakiye Hanım. My father was a European educated person. My mother was a very religious and traditional woman. She has given me religious education since my childhood and also instilled in me the love of the country and the nation. I spent my childhood on the farms of my grandmother, Adile Hanım. I had two nannies here. I loved them so much. My nannies were very interested in my education. They have a great role in my acquaintance with the Turkish culture and literature. I started my primary education at Yeni Mektep in 1889. This was a religious school. After studying here for a few years, I was enrolled in another Western-style school. I learned to read and write in a short time. I was also taking Arabic and Persian lessons. My interest in reading caught the attention of my family. In 1897, we moved to Thessaloniki as a family. My father was going to work here as a civil servant. I was going to continue my high school education. My father would meet his friends and discuss country matters. He used to take me with him to these meetings. The things they talked about intrigued me. It was during this period that I started reading Namık Kemal's writings. I came to Istanbul in 1902 to continue my education. I stayed here in the mansion of my mother's relative, Ibrahim Bey. I wrote poems and sent them to literary magazines. My first poems were published during this period. I was very curious about Europe. During this period, I became more interested in the affairs of the country. I was interested in the Young Turks, so I decided to go to Paris. After an adventurous cruise, I arrived in Paris in 1903. I lived here for a while among the Young Turks. I've studied French. My days were very active. I met with the most important names of the world of art, literature and politics. I have visited many cities in Europe. I lived in London for 2 months. I enrolled in the School of Political Sciences in Paris. While I was continuing my classes, I was interested in theatre and doing research on Turkish history. Then in 1908, I started the history department at the Sorbonne University. By the way, I also departed from the Young Turks. I was following the literary and artistic agenda of Paris rather than political issues and writing poems. I returned to my homeland in 1912. As soon as I returned, I started teaching history and literature at the university. Ziya Gökalp was also influential in giving me this task. Ahmet Hamdi Tanpınar was among my students. I was taking history classes at the Naval School. Among my students here was Nazım Hikmet. Meanwhile, the First World War had ended and the Ottoman Empire was defeated. After that, we should have to work for the national struggle. During these years, I wrote articles supporting the national struggle with all my might. These articles were published as a book called Eğil Mountains. After the victory of the national struggle, I met Mustafa Kemal in Bursa. Mustafa Kemal invited me to Ankara. I went to Ankara in 1922. That year, I advised the Turkish delegation at the Lausanne Peace Treaty. After returning from Lausanne, I entered the parliament as a deputy. In the following years, I held important positions at various levels of the government. However, my interest in literature never waned. During my lifetime, my poems and articles were published in different journals. All of this would be compiled and made into a book in the following years. My poetry book, Our Own Dome, was published in 1961. My poems in this book are about the power of Turkishness and the beauty of Islam. I adhere to Ottoman history and the culture in my poems and writings. In particular, I found the conquest of Istanbul very important. My book titled Dear Istanbul contains my writings about the conquest of Istanbul. I also wrote poems about the natural and cultural features of Istanbul, its old districts and the Bosphorus. Many of these were composed and performed by various artists. Turkish history and culture have been the subject that I gave the most importance throughout my life. I was the opinion that Turkish national literature would only be possible with a good understanding of Turkish history. Dear children, my life has been spent thinking, reading and writing. I thought that by doing this, I would be useful to my nation. If you read a lot and work hard, be sure that you can achieve great things.